God.
Don't start, Eric.
I know, I know. I'm trying not to.
Do you have water?
No, it's in the kitchen.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
Let's see if it's. Oh,
hey,
there we are.
we are
Hey,
live.
everybody.
Sorry, technical difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you everybody for waiting. Again, sorry. We thought we had it licked and we didn't. So there we go. But hey, we're here now. Thank you so much for coming to a live event. You probably hear our dogs in the background, so you know that's the wonders of being live.
Mm-hmm.
But so obviously today we're talking about Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, and I know there's a lot of, I guess, just a lot of unknowns. At least with, unless you were watching a Disney movie, which I heard it's good. I know it's good. I've seen it, but learning this, especially for me being a brown skinned man, learning it from Coco makes me feel really terrible. But unfortunately, that's it's what it is. But we're pretty excited because we
Mm-hmm.
have Eric and Michelle Connor from We Believe to You, and they are going to set me straight, at least at least to some degree, anyway. But so yeah, so it's a 2 day. I'll go ahead and pitch it to you guys. What do you want to say, or what's the what background do you want to give on the celebration?
Yeah, so it is actually it starts the day before, and actually it could even so in some places it even starts on Halloween. So
Oh,
and even further than that, because I actually had a friend send me a little printout or some messages where you start. I believe it's on the 29th, and then the 30th, and then the 31st or the first. You start lighting candles for your on your altar. So because a big
okay,
thing is the altar, which Michelle will get into in a little bit. But yeah, the main days or the actual Dia de los Muertos or Day of the Dead is November 2nd, and
okay,
it is associated with like All Hallows Tide or All Hallows Mass, and that again encompasses All Hallows Eve, which is Halloween, then All Saints Day, sorry, which is November 1st, and then Day of the Dead or All Souls Day, which is November 2nd. And
gotcha.
yeah, and usually and that's from those are from the Western like Western Christianity, Western Christian cultures. And Dia de los Muertos is, while those can tend to be a bit more solemn, this Dia de los Muertos is a little bit more joyful. It's a day where you
Right,
celebrate your loved ones that have passed on. So a lot of
right.
times there's drinks involved, there's food, and you usually set up the altars with it. But again, I'll let Michelle get into that. Um, there is some debate as to whether uh, because some say that Dia de los Muertos originated in Mexico, but there are some people from the Mexican INAH, which is the Instituto Nacional de Antropología e Historia. So it's the National Institute of Anthropology and History. Uh, a couple people from there are saying that a lot, if not all of Dia de los Muertos comes from medieval Europe or what is it, Catholic Southern Europe.
Okay,
But there are
Hmm.
people who claim that the Aztecs, I believe, also had their traditions that it was from October the 20th through the November 8th, where they would celebrate Quechoi, I believe is what it is, and they were celebrating, they were honoring the god of war, which was Mitzcoatl, is the name of the god. So
oh, okay,
that's where the Mexican tradition comes in, where what they call indejismo, which is the indigenous people. They say that it was there before the Spanish came and tried to
hmm,
colonize them. But then, like with the Druids in the Celtic people and the Druids, they had their on Halloween where it was like this big, yeah, their Halloween celebration called it's Samhain, right? Or
Samhain?
Samhain,
Samhain.
yes,
so
Samhain.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
yeah. Uh, and then again, the Romans came in, started kind of taking over those territories, and then they brought in their traditions, and then they started mixing their traditions, and we just get this big old mishmash of, you know, of celebrations that start forming, what we know today as Day of the Dead or Dia de los Muertos.
Right. That's really fascinating because again, I don't have as much knowledge of it, but to know it goes back, to not just mestizos or Latinos or anything like that, but there's kind of this celebration that happens in many different cultures, and it's
Yes.
it's it's an ancient celebration. So I find it interesting that it's still somewhat new here in the U.S. I know it's not new for our culture, but at least at least as far as like mainstream goes, as far as because I know where I'm from, Tucson, Arizona, we have ridiculous celebrations for it, but there's a
Hmm.
very heavy Latino community there, so you would expect to see that, but I think just recently it's kind of made its way through, middle of America, and it's become okay. There is another celebration, and granted, largely has to do with that movie, but yeah, I find that really interesting.
Yeah, I think that may also have to do with people just wanting to reconnect with their cultures. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yes.
Because I mean, I know growing up, we didn't ever have an altar or an altar where we would,
Mm-hmm.
celebrate Day of the Dead. I only started doing it last year with my wife, and this is the second year that we set up an altar. And I asked my parents today, did you guys ever, because we never grew up, I wanted to know if maybe they didn't grow up uh, doing that either. And both of them said that no, that like my mom said she celebrated Halloween. And my dad also told me that growing up, he never remembers his mother setting up an altar or anything like that for Day of the Dead either. So I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's
Mm.
something for even for us that was kind of like lost, and it wasn't until, like you said, the movie Coco came out
Mm-hmm.
that maybe we started kind of having a little bit more interest, or once I started going to Mexico and seeing my wife's family set up their little altar, that I started becoming more interested in the topic.
Sure. No, that makes perfect sense. And I also wonder, with Mexico, there's so much, from one territory to another. It can probably vary a lot between different parts of the culture within Mexico too. So, even when like my ancestors came up, they came up from like Sierra Madres, and I'm sure there's all so many different things that were never carried to the U.S. that were celebrated back then. Now, my grandmother was huge curandera. I'm surprised we didn't celebrate Dia de los Muertos because she often would have candles, much like what we have here, and she would have like we would go to San Javier Mission, and we would have there would always be San Javier, which is kind of like is a big patron saint, and he
It's like a Franciscan
yeah,
church.
Franciscan
Yeah.
church, and they would put candles, very big candelabra put together. And to me, I always said, well, I wonder why we never did have an ofrenda, because to me, that's what she was doing. She would take pictures of us, like if you were sick or something, they would take a picture of you and put it with that candle. So
Mm,
I always found that really interesting that we didn't celebrate it. So, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I feel like part of it, I obviously can't speak for everybody and whatnot, but I think, part of it is a lot of our parents or families like came to the States, and it was very much kind of ingrained like, no, now you're in the States and you lose a little bit of your culture because you're trying to fit in.
Yeah.
And I think, especially with a lot of what's going on in the world today, like a lot of people are wanting to, like you guys said, get back into the. I know I'm like, for me personally, that's what it was. I'm like, no, I feel like I've lost so much of it already. Even just moving from Brownsville to Austin, like
Mm-hmm.
I can feel that loss of culture, and so I'm like, no, I need to tap back into it. And even though this isn't something that we did growing up, it's, I think, a beautiful ceremony and a beautiful
Yeah.
celebration. And so many people are afraid of death. This is a beautiful
Mm-hmm.
way to celebrate life. Like death is gonna happen. It's inevitable, right? We all
Yes, it
pass.
is.
But instead of, being sad and mourning, we can celebrate and be happy for the time that we did have with our loved ones and stuff. So,
For sure.
yeah.
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, was that it, Eric? As far as the history, like a quick little
I mean,
snapshot?
yeah, just that's like a real quick
Yeah.
snapshot
I mean,
of what
we
it
could probably
is.
be on
Yeah.
here for hours, really
Oh
covering
yeah,
just the history of it. For
definitely.
sure.
Yeah.
So, Michelle, did you want to kind of give us a kind of what you found with the altar, kind of how what you found information about?
Yeah, of course. I mean, one of the things I feel like is kind of the staple of the, Dia de los Muertos is the calaveras. So like the skull right behind you guys,
Mm-hmm.
the skull with brightly colored flowers and things like that, designs all over them. For me personally, like it was always, I mean, I haven't always loved skulls as much as I do now,
Yeah.
but I feel like having grown up, Latina, a lot of people symbolize skulls with death, where I'm like, but they're so beautiful. They're covered in
Yeah.
flowers and bright colors. Like it's not, I don't know, maybe that kind of eased the scariness factor for me growing up.
Yeah.
But so you'll see those calaveras, whether it's the makeup or actual sugar skulls that are made with granulated sugar, powdered, some water, so it gets like sand-like texture, and then
Mm-hmm.
and decorate with icing, and it's kind of just like a sweet treat for your loved ones, or for children during the celebration to enjoy. um and then you also have it, I think, in your little mini altar back there is the marigolds, or the
Yep.
cempasúchil. And it's often referred to as the flowers of the dead, or flor de muerto. And it's believed that the scent of because I don't know if you guys have ever smelled them, but they're pretty pungent.
I
They
have.
are.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Supposed to plant them in your garden to keep the bugs away.
Yeah.
yeah,
Really?
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's believed that the bright orange blooms help attract the souls to the altar. And then it's kind of like a multiple, like you want to have all the elements. So you also have papel picado, or like perforated paper. You might have
Mm-hmm.
seen, like, they're usually like banners.
Yeah.
It used to all be done by hand. I know, me personally, I'm just like, I'm gonna buy that because it kind of looks like when you like cut out a snowflake with the paper
That's always what
kind
I
of
always thought it
thing.
looked like
Mm-hmm.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's super similar, but that's supposed to represent air. And it's believed that the holes are a way to allow the souls to travel through and visit. And it's also believed that the delicate nature of the paper is symbolic of the fragility of life, which, I mean,
Wow.
it's pretty on point.
It's interesting.
That's really deep.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
I mean, just looking at it, you would never think that there's so much depth to the decorations and stuff. You think
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
oh, they just put that up, So, I like that.
and I've always
Yeah.
thought a skull is what you say. It is, when we pass, it's one of the things that we leave, but I think it's also it's a symbol of how I don't know how much beauty can be in our human form, because if you think about it, a skull is kind of the ultimate in symmetrical. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And it's almost like the perfection behind it says something about us as humanity. I don't know. That's always been my feeling with the skull, is that, yeah, granted, it can be a bit macabre if you want it to be, but it's so perfect. When you go right down to it, it houses us. At least with the physicality of the brain and all that stuff. But it's perfectly symmetrical, and I find
Yeah.
so much beauty in that. Now,
Mm-hmm.
granted, when they look at my skull, it's probably not not so symmetrical. Who knows? But for the most part, I think it probably is. But
Yeah.
no, that's pretty awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the
And
thing I
I'm
take from it is like, sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
Oh, no, no. I was just gonna keep going with what else is usually on the altar, but no, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say is like I think in America we're not really introduced to death at an early age. Usually your parents keep you home from funerals, stuff like that, and so
Mm-hmm.
when you get to be a teenager, an adult, you're so afraid of death by that point that we can't really accept it, and I think it's worse for us.
Yeah.
Whereas any of these other cultures, they celebrate it in a way. They honor their ancestors, and it's just a part of life.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I
Yeah.
don't think we get that here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I
I
agree.
thought it was super interesting. Yeah, when I did the deep dive on Ouija boards, that I mean they were doing like basically Sunday school, but they were holding seances and doing Ouija board activities with children because death was so,
Hmm.
especially back in the day, like everyone was dying, whether it was disease or war.
Right.
Right.
So it was nothing new. It was a part of life. A part of life. Like people had living rooms. They also like that. Also second as
Mm-hmm.
death
Mm-hmm.
rooms. Like that's where they would show their lost loved ones and stuff. So I feel like I've had this conversation multiple times, especially recently. I feel like my grandmother's passing kind of, yeah, made me really think about death and it's, I guess, a different way of thinking about it. Instead of being afraid of it, kind of not welcoming it either per se, but
Right.
being
Right.
okay with it and just understanding that it is, life is a cycle, it's just another cycle,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's not as
I
scary
quote,
anymore,
I
I
quote a
guess.
very famous or very favorite famous character of mine from The Office, Stanley. He says, "I'm okay with the logic of it. I don't know if I'm okay with it."
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, for most of us, when we lose that person that's close to us for the first time,
Yeah.
that definitely changes our outlook on it because then I mean, you don't want them gone, but especially if they've been suffering before, you accept that
Hmm.
they had to go. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
better for them in that way. And you're not as scared of it, in the thought of them possibly reaching out to you. You're not frightened that way. You long for that.
Right.
You want to
Hmm.
hear from them. And I think that's a big thing that happens for most of us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
definitely.
So, what else did you find, or what else is usually on an altar?
Yeah, so you usually also have a pan de muerto, which is a soft and sweet bread that's designed in a circle that's supposed to represent the skull, and then
Mm.
like I guess limbs basically that are supposed to
Mm-hmm.
skull and crossbones basically.
Oh,
I guess
okay.
Okay.
I've also seen it in different ways, so I think this is probably maybe one of those like regional things where people kind of do it differently. Um, I literally just had a bagel, so I put out a bagel because I didn't
Good
have
idea.
pan de muerto.
For sure.
It's an everything bagel, so it was a little more, tasty
Mm-hmm.
but flavorful. But yeah, so you also try to include things that, or sorry, the other important thing would be salt, which is, it doesn't make sense to me, but it's supposed to help quench the thirst of the souls. Salt
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
set out in the pattern of the cross, and it's so that the soul won't be corrupted. And he says it also helps purify them. And if
Oh, okay.
you're any sort of witchy, salt is like good for protection and everything too. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have
Mm.
heard of that, but
Yeah,
yeah, the quenching the thirst.
that's interesting. Well,
That
you
and you
know,
doesn't make
also,
sense to me. you
yeah,
know.
they say sometimes if you put salt in water, there's like an electrolyte boost
Hmm.
in that. So maybe
yeah,
that's part
Bring
of it.
them back,
Maybe.
help bring them back.
yeah.
Maybe at least nourish them.
Yeah,
Hmm.
possibly.
And you can definitely also set out like other, well, water. I put out coffee because I know that my grandmother loved coffee, and so did my grandfather. And obviously, the most important thing too would be photos, right? Photos of your
Hmm.
lost loved ones. So yeah, I'm trying to think if I missed anything. Eric, did I miss anything?
I think sometimes instead of salt, you can also use what they call cal, or I think it's lye in
Hmm.
English.
Hmm. Okay.
So
Okay.
I think they could use that instead of the salt if you know. But yeah,
That's an
Lye is
interesting
like a
compound.
fat. Like they used to
Yeah.
make soap out of it.
Right.
So
It's very acidic though. That's kind of interesting. I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's pretty amazing. Was that it for the altar anyway?
Yeah, I mean, pretty
Yeah.
much. You can also just put things, that your loved ones like. Like usually if a child has passed, then you'll put out toys, or if they like a specific type of mezcal or something, you can put that out.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of is just dependent on. I added a whole bunch of crystals because I had a whole bunch, and I did one that represented all of my lost family members, and oh, cannot forget about the candles. Always have to have candles,
Right.
preferably
Mm-hmm.
white as well. So
Right.
Yeah. So like for example, I put out some of my grandmother's CDs that she had in her car that she passed on to me. So we put those out for her. My wife's grandfather liked his tequila, so one of his favorite brands was Jimador, so we put that out for him.
That's good.
Coffee out, a little mini Coke because my wife's grandfather liked Coke, an apple soda for her grandmother, and just a little fun fact. They actually say, or this is a suppose something, I guess, a myth, or one of the things they say about the food that you put out is that once you put that food out, and after the day the day has passed, that food is now calorie free
Mm,
because
nice.
your loved ones come and they take the nourishment from that food. It's no longer, it's got no nutritional value, I guess, or no calories, no nutrition or anything. So yeah,
That's so
you'd be
interesting.
eating it
We'll have
and you'd
to
be
get a
having
big old
nothing.
table,
I was
Yeah.
gonna say.
packet full of all the good stuff.
I
Put a
missed
bunch
that
of bowls
memo.
of ice cream up there.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Yeah. Just thinking a whole
Wow.
cake. I'm like, yeah, it's for you guys, and then just eat it later.
I
I
can
think
put
a
that on that
pizza.
bottle. Yeah. I
Yeah.
could
Yeah, right.
take
Yeah,
down
that's
that
true.
bottle
Put a
and no effects.
What?
No
No
calories.
effects. Hey, 0 calories.
No alcohol.
That's awesome. Oh
That's
man.
interesting. Hmm.
Yeah. So what we have today? Now we didn't do the full ofrenda. I think that's something we do want to do, kind of moving forward.
Well,
Um,
we last year I set up just pictures
right.
of all of
Mhm.
our loved ones that had passed on this wooden tree that we had.
Yep.
But no like offerings. Obviously, I don't know that much about that part
Mhm.
of it, but yeah.
But we set out, so you might guys might get a kind of some fun out of this. So I think we're kind of offering for a few different loved ones here. For me, uh, the beer. So I lost my dad at a very early age, and I'll try not to get choked up. But uh, he loved to have a beer. You know, we'd all have a good celebration, and I always remember, gosh, birthdays, all the celebrations. You know, we could throw a few back. My dad and I. He's my best friend, so you know, when he passed, that was kind of the thing a lot of us did. We all got together and had a few beers for dad. So that's for dad. Now, what's interesting is it's kind of playing double duty because mi abuela, she would also do that with us. So this is kind of for both of them.
Nice.
Nice.
I'm not gonna say we're alcoholics or anything, but you know we have some fun. So that's kind of there for my loved ones. You wanna?
Well, this kind of covers my entire family. We have some chocolate chips here.
Okay.
Because chocolate is king in my entire family, both sides.
Yeah.
My dad loved it.
Yeah.
My grandfathers, all basically everybody. And then I lost my aunt this year, which we've previously talked about that, and she loves sunflowers, so that's sunflowers for her.
Nice.
Yeah.
Lovely.
So
But I think we didn't do the pictures just because I don't
it's
know.
a personal
Yeah,
thing.
it's a bit
and-
personal,
yeah.
and we're still trying to figure out how we want to put everything together. But that's kind of what we have for our offerings today. So we hadn't really had a whole lot of user. Wow, talk about work stuck in my brain. A lot of listeners and a lot of viewers write in, which is fine. That's perfectly okay. But I'll go ahead and I kind of wanted to start talking a little bit about kind
Well,
of we.
let's tell
Oh.
them that so that they can.
Oh,
You
yeah,
can
yeah,
use
go
the
ahead.
chat
Yeah.
and tell us a story. We can read it. We don't have to use your name.
Mm-mm.
And you can email us at info@gxparanormal, or there is a link, and I think you included it there.
Yeah,
You
it's
can
in the
click on.
description.
You can come on video
Mm-hmm.
and speak to us and tell us your story if
Yeah.
you would like.
Join us in the madness. But so yeah, I'll go ahead and kind of start off with kind of what the experience. I'll be honest with you, I've had a lot of experiences, but I think these two, I'm gonna have one for myself and one for my mom, are really really profound. So as I mentioned, I lost my dad when I was 27, and it was pretty devastating for the entire family. He was kind of the spark plug of the whole family. Um, yeah, yeah, it was a tragic loss for us all, as anybody would have if they lose a parent. But it hit us all really really hard at the timing. He'd been sick for a while, so we knew. We always maintain hope, but we knew that there was a possibility that it was going to go that way, and fortunately it did. But This was 22 years ago, so kind of gives you an idea how old I am. But so yeah, what was one of the, I guess the first thing is we had his memorial. Now my father, he was a teacher, so there was a lot of people there. He's kind of one of the, he was a very well known man in his community. So we kind of left it open for the families if they wanted to bring his kids that were in his classroom to come to his wake. We're absolutely okay with that and with his funeral services. And we just didn't want to say you had to be there, but because it was the death of a teacher, so we weren't sure how they were going to react to that. But man, they showed up. There was probably, gosh, I have a sign-in book that's full. I mean, I gotta say, for a room that probably could fit 20, there was at least 50 people. Their standing room, they're actually outside just to be there. So it was very touching. And one of the things I wanted to do is I kind of wanted to show something alive that they could kind of identify with him. So we'd gotten a dove to release, and so of course, it was very difficult. We went through the services and we asked everybody to meet us outside, and sorry. Um, so as everybody was around, we let the dove go, and typically these things fly off and they do what they do what birds do. Not this one. So I used it as a symbolic gesture that this is my dad and we're releasing him so that he can be free. And instead of flying away, that dove flew right to the nearest tree, turned around and just looked at all of us,
Oh.
and just kind of kept
Wow.
kind of just kind of like staring at us, almost like taking a beat, looked around, then flew off. That right there devastated myself and a lot of people that day. That was really difficult. But another time, and I've got just a couple, but my dad had been passed now for about a year at this point, and I was in the military and I was just rotating out. And when I got out, I ended up moving my grandmother in with me because he was actually he had her living with him, and he was kind of her caretaker and everything too. And so I assumed that role. And especially with our culture, we don't, we're very much so, and I'm sure you guys understand, you know, doing the whole, assisted living and all that stuff. That's very last straw for us, or at least for my family. We just don't do that. So I assume that role. And sorry, I'm a little breathy, 'cause I'm a little choked up. But so we had moved in, and we didn't have a whole lot of furniture, and there was a desk. I needed a desk for my computer. So I went to Walmart and bought one of those cheap desks, that you put together and bust all your knuckles with. And anyway, so I'm in our kind of our hallway because our two rooms were on one side, and it was just too much of a pain to try to put certain parts together in the room. So I have it kind of out in the hallway, and we had just moved in, and I'm putting this thing together, and I got that sensation and I was alone at that time. My grandmother wasn't there. She was actually, I think, visiting one of her relatives. And I just like, okay, I know I'm not alone. I'm just going to kind of keep going. And as I did, I just got this. It wasn't a bad feeling. It was just, I knew I wasn't alone. When I looked over, I could see where some of the light had kind of been blocked out by something, almost like a black mass, but not entirely. And I'm like, okay, deep breath. I just kind of kept going. And then if you could hear sound, I actually sensed it. I could hear this rush of wind coming towards me. The scariest thing I've ever had experienced in my life. And when I looked over, now I don't know for sure, but it sure felt like it moved right through me. And when it did, it was like an instant, okay, I
Oh.
was calm. I feel like I felt him move through me because I had kind of taken, stepped up, done the thing that I was supposed to do, and I brought my grandmother there, and he wanted me to know that.
Yeah.
So that was my two. And then my mom, the day he passed away, my mom and my dad had separated for many years. They were very, very close still, but when she was asleep, the day that he passed away that evening, she said there was definitely a presence. There was a black mass that kind of made her feel okay, but she definitely knew it was him.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
so yeah, that was where I definitely had that. I feel like that's where he was able to reach back out to me. And if anybody out there knew my dad, that whole rushing to scare the heck out of me is perfectly on point for him. So anybody that knew that was probably could get a good laugh out of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is one of now. To be honest with you, there's not a day that goes by I don't think about him, and there's not a moment that I don't wonder if I don't turn around and see him. And when I look in the mirror, I see him every single day. So it's like, it's just one of those things. But yeah, that was kind of my first, not first, but my loved one coming back that I kind of wanted to share.
Yeah. I've definitely heard, other people who have lost loved ones that like sense of peace that you mentioned. That
Mm.
when you're just like feeling overwhelmed or, just feeling kind of emotional or just really missing that person, all of a sudden, yeah, like they feel a presence and then they're just calm and all
Yeah,
that goes away. So that's beautiful. And I can imagine, especially being losing your father, it's just the emotions are high
yeah,
there kind of thing.
they were, and it's definitely like I said, it's pretty on point with what he would do, and I did, and I was young and I was confused. A lot of stuff going on in my life at that time, and this is no big surprise, but I had a previous wife, and at that particular time, we had split up, and my whole life was in upheaval.
Mm.
So being there, I kind of just felt lost.
Yeah.
So when he did that, and I'm always gonna say it was him, but when he did that, I felt like I'm good. I did the right thing.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Well, I never knew him. Okay, so we got married way after
Mm-hmm.
he passed away. But we had moved out to Arizona to actually take care of his grandmother for the last few years of her life. And I remember we had just moved into this house, and I was hanging up pictures, and I happened to have a picture frame with his dad's photo in it. I was hanging it on the wall, and I'd bent over to pick up the hammer or something. I don't really remember. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw like a shadow, like peeking around the corner of the wall.
Oof.
And, at that time I attributed it to like I was just standing up, and I got really dizzy.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a black shadow. And I hung it on the wall, everything. I just remember feeling off. But that night, then I had a dream about his father. And I was sitting in a house. Do you remember me telling you
Mm-hmm.
this?
Yeah.
In a house, and he just walked in. He didn't even say anything to me, and he just kind of like waved, and then
Huh.
turned around and walked out like he was just introducing himself to me
Yeah.
Aw.
because we never got to meet. And
Yeah.
so I've always carried that with me that he accepted me, I guess,
Yeah.
as the wife.
Yeah.
He did.
I don't know, but
Yeah.
yep. So he definitely made his presence known to me.
And that again would be pretty on brand for him. That'd be the kind of thing he'd do.
Mm-hmm.
That's adorable. I love that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's one of those where, and I'm pretty sure that's why a lot of people maybe didn't share right away because it is pretty difficult to talk about some of that.
It is.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm
Well,
emotional.
we'll turn something over to one of you guys if there's something you want to share, and we'll just go back and forth, I guess, if you want.
Uh,
No, I
Go
was
ahead,
just
Eric.
gonna say I think since my grandmother's passed, I've been wanting to have, I don't know, her come to me in my dreams or just
Mm-hmm.
have that. Well, no, you know what? There was this one time that I was driving that I could have sworn she was like sitting next to me. Because I used to work night shift, so I used to always come back. At one point I was working like 14-hour shifts on like 2 3 hours of sleep, and since my she was living with my dad at the time, and him and his wife worked out of in the in Westlaco, or sorry, they work in the upper valley and we live in the lower valley of where we live. uh I would go visit her when I would get out of work, and I'd be there with her for a while, and she would always tell me that she wanted, that she was praying for me. So when I'm driving home, because she knows that I'm exhausted, this and that. And I remember recently, I work days now, and I was driving home, but for some reason, I think I hadn't slept well the night before. So I was super tired, and I felt like I was dozing on my way home. and then all of a sudden it was dark. Out of the corner of my eye, I even felt like a presence of somebody sitting next to me in the car. And when I kind of got the peek out of the corner of my eye, I almost saw like my grandmother's silhouette sitting next to me in the car. So it was that's been like the only time. I think the other thing too is like when there was a point where she was very sick in the hospital, and
Ooh, I was,
yeah,
go ahead.
she was very sick in the hospital, and she came. I think that's what I feel like. She came to visit both of us in our dreams, and based off of our reactions, I think she was like, "All right, well, I can't leave yet," and I always feel like because of the way we reacted at that point, she was just like, I'm probably not gonna come see you guys because I don't want you crying over me. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that was the big thing about my grandmother. Like, man, she was tough as nails. And I remember visiting her in the hospital once, and I just immediately started crying upon seeing her, and she's like, "I don't want you in here if you're gonna cry." I was like, oh, "Okay, never mind. I'm not crying."
Yeah.
So like
I'm
that
not
was her.
crying, you're crying.
She just was a very tough woman, and like very strong, and expected the same, and like for us not to be like sad over her basically. But I feel like or sorry, Eric, were you done with your experiences?
oh, I mean,
Just
it was no. I was gonna let you jump in because and then I could tell
because it ties
my other
together.
little yeah, it ties together. Yeah, so I was just
Yeah,
gonna go
I
ahead and
mean,
let you go.
yeah, I think that like I kind of have a few also, but this experience that Eric just brought up, I feel like set a standard for what we expected for like afterlife visit, and the fact that we haven't gotten that, we're slightly
Yeah,
disappointed. But so yeah, basically she had been in the hospital for months, and it was in the beginning of the pandemic, I believe, or middle of it, so we couldn't go visit
yeah.
her.
It was
So
right when it started. Hmm.
yeah, so it was a lot of, we could FaceTime her when she was feeling well, and but she got to a point where she was, pretty unwell, to the point that they're saying like, all right, we'll start making plans for the end kind of thing. Um, and well, obviously we're all really struggling with that. And so anyway, one night I go to sleep. It's every other night, nothing new. And then all of a sudden I realize in that I'm dreaming, and I'm in a different space. Like everything's black, but not like a scary black. It's just empty. And then I see this tiny little light start to get brighter and brighter, and and I'm gonna try and say this without getting emotional because it always gets me very emotional. But the light starts getting brighter, and I see this silhouette, and I hear this woman's voice saying something over and over. And as the light gets brighter, the silhouette kind of gets clearer, and I realize that it's the Virgin Mary. And my grandmother was very Catholic, so it, you know, made sense, or I recognized her. And the moment that in my dream I was like, oh, it's the Virgin Mary, I literally felt like I got yanked out of my body, because I then got pulled, like that bright light had completely filled the space at this point, and it was almost like a super foggy day, or like if someone dragged you through a cloud where you can feel like the mist like on your face and stuff, and the air. So I feel like I get yanked out of my body. That happens for like a few seconds, and then I'm back in my bedroom and I'm awake. And I was like, well, that was a weird dream. And then all of a sudden my bedroom door opens and my grandma walks through, clear as day. Like it's nighttime in my room, just like how I had fallen asleep, and she walks in, and I'm not even processing that she's walking into my bedroom while I'm awake, because she's not. She's like 6 hours away, and I'm like, oh my gosh, grandma, I can't wait to tell you. Like I just saw the Virgin Mary. Like I'm so excited to tell her, because again, she's so Catholic. She would be excited to hear that. And she walks over to the other side of my bed, sits down. I can feel like the bed, move and everything, and she's not like really responding to me, and she finally just kind of puts her finger up like, shut up, like be quiet. And so I'm like, oh, okay, like what? And she literally didn't even say anything. It was almost, whether it was telepathically or just by the look on her face, but the message that I got was, I'm tired, that she was tired. And I knew where she was going to go with that, so I just immediately like I had grabbed her hand and I put it up against my face, and I could feel like the coolness of her skin, like the softness of her hand, like everything, was real. It was super real. And so I just started crying, and I'm like, no, 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 like you can't, no, like I am now. And and then she just kind of like, not was annoyed, but was like, like kind of annoyed, and then pushed on my chest and pushed me back. I feel like back into my body, because the moment I fell backwards, I like woke up for real this time and was like, holy shit, and then sorry, holy crap,
You're
and then just started sobbing. Uh,
We're past the
and
30. We're past the 30 seconds.
Yeah.
yeah, I was doing so good too. Um, but yeah, so I had that experience, and then Eric, I felt crazy and I thought it was just a dream until, yeah, Eric had an experience as well.
Yeah. So before I share my part of the story, I also want to say that a few days before she actually passed away, the last conversation that I had with her while she was in the hospital was like these weren't her last words to me, but this is one of the last things, like beginnings of a conversation that we had that day was, I'm tired and I feel like I'm disappointing you guys. And I like so when Michelle said that right now, like it reminded me of like the last, day that I saw her, and her telling me that she was tired because like this, like Michelle said, this woman had gone through so much
In
since the
life,
start of the
really.
pandemic. Yeah, in life in general. But at the beginning of the pandemic, she was in the hospital. Um, and then she ended up being in the hospital. Like I think we got to see her for like 2 weeks before they ended up shutting down hospitals because it was like at the beginning or middle of March. So they shut
Mm.
everything down. She was doing not well in the hospital to begin with, but then just us having gone, she ended up in the hospital for about 3 months. Uh, she was ended up intubated for about 10 days, which is the max they allowed her to be intubated. So then they ended up having to uh, put a tracheostomy in, which is basically they put a hole in your trachea, they put a tube down there, and that's how you breathe. And she was on a ventilator because she wasn't breathing on her own. So she was going through all of this by herself without us being able to be by her side. Like Michelle said, the most we could do was FaceTime her, and speak to her through the phone. And then she can't really speak to us, and she would get frustrated because she has a trach in her throat, so she can't really speak.
Yeah.
So, like, a lot of times we would be talking to her, and she would just hang up on us, but not because she
Out of
was mad at
frustration.
us. Yeah, it was just out of frustration of not being able to
Yeah.
communicate. So I say all that because it kind of leads up into my story where before she was sick, when she was still living on her own or with, in her own house, she would drive herself. That was like one of her biggest things. Like she was super independent. She worked until literally until the day she was uh, placed into the hospital for her, you know, have her surgery for her cancer. She also went through, like I said, she went through everything. So she was super independent. And there was a couple times where she kind of just showed up at my house, and then we would look out the window and my grandmother was there pulling up in her car, and she'd be walking up the stairs and knock on the door. So I'm dreaming, and in my dream, uh, I look out the window and I see my grandmother, and I'm like, wait, what is she doing? She's supposed to be in the hospital. So I go to answer the door, and she just looks like I open it, and she doesn't even say anything. The first thing I tell her is, "What are you doing here? Like, I thought you were in the hospital." And uh, she still didn't say anything, and I just dropped to my knees and I start crying because I knew everything that she was going through, and to see her standing there the way I had seen her before, like, and it felt so real. You know what I mean? Like it felt like I
Mm-hmm.
was actually there, and that she was, that I was hugging her, and she kind of just, I can't remember now if she said anything to me, but I remember her just kind of like pushing me off, and then I snapped awake. And And again, like it
That's
almost
interesting.
felt, yeah, it almost felt like she was like, okay, these guys are not ready for me to go yet. So
Mm-hmm.
Right.
she like pushed us out of these, like what probably would have,
Visitations.
yeah, what would have been her final visitations to us, and was just like, well, I guess I can't go yet, you know. And she came back, and she got off the
Literally from that
vent.
point, yeah. After those dreams,
Everything just
shortly
started
after
happening.
that, and she,
Wow.
Mm.
when we got another year with her, like
Yeah, another
she
year.
came home shortly after, and I really do truly think that it was like a she was gonna try and say goodbye, and we are both like, nah. She's like, oh, fine. And I mean, she did always say too, like everything, all the treatments, all the surgeries, all these visits, doctor's visits that she did. She always said that she did it for her family, like she did it for
Mm-hmm.
us because,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
you know, had it been completely up to her, she would have been like, you know, forget this, like I'm over it. But you know,
Yeah.
she fought really hard.
And just to give
But
you an
Yeah.
idea as well, when she passed, obviously my sister's in Austin. I was going out of town to Houston that weekend, so I was, you know, not saying my goodbyes. Like I was just saying, like making sure she was good before I left. And then that's when she comes with the, you know, I'm tired and I don't want to disappoint you guys. So uh, I basically told her, you know,
it's okay.
I didn't tell her that it was okay to, you know, to
Right.
go, but I told her that she's suffered enough and that, you know, if she felt tired, it was okay. You know, that we like we understood, and I was speaking for my family at that moment, but in a way it was kind of selfish for me. Like it was a selfish way of me being like, look, I just, if you need to go, like you can go, because I'm just tired. Like I don't want to see you suffering anymore, you know. And
Yeah.
so I was out of town, I was in Houston, my dad was on call outside of the city,
Mm.
so she decided to go when none of us could be around her,
Mm.
you know.
Mm.
uh or none, like, because she knew it was going to kill us if we had to be there by her
Yeah,
side when she left.
Right.
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I think she decided to go out on her own terms, and you know, and by that I mean like when none of us were around to, you know, to be there with her.
Sure.
She did
Mm.
have her daughter-in-law there with her, uh,
Yeah.
but you know, I mean, in the hospital the day before, she ended up passing in the nursing home. So literally by herself in the nursing home, because at
Mm.
that point she was in the nursing home because she had just had her second hip surgery within a couple of months. So that was the only reason she was in a nursing home at that point, because
Right.
uh,
She's
besides that,
recovering.
yeah, it was anytime she was in a nursing home or any kind of facility like that, it was for recovery only, because that was what the doctors needed. And then as soon as she was done getting, you know, recovering there, she was back home, you know, at
Yeah.
my dad's
Mm.
house, you know. So yeah,
That's thank you guys. That's
The similarities and the
yeah.
experiences too.
yeah,
It's just
Wow.
and
crazy.
I think it was days
Yeah.
apart too.
Yeah,
Like both of our
I think
experiences were days
two days
apart.
apart.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, I
Well, it happens in dreams. So many. I mean, I've
yeah.
got my own experiences with dreams. They come in dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it kind of falls a little in line too with what we're talking about today is that I think when you're dreaming that veil gets thinned out a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and there is an opportunity I think
And maybe
to
we're
talk.
more, we're not as scared in our dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah,
I don't know how our subconscious works that way, but
right.
we're
What?
more accepting of seeing them. We're not like,
Yeah.
hey, you're not supposed to be here. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
you don't think about that till you wake up.
Yeah. Well, and
So
the
I think maybe
realness
that's
of it.
why.
Yeah.
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 Well, yeah, there is that surrealness of having to go through all that, and I get the fact because we were really rapidly approaching a point with my grandmother that I wasn't going to be able to care for her anymore. She was having issue with dementia, and we're like, well, I mean, what are we going to do? I don't want to leave her, but there would be times where she'd forget to leave the or turn the stove off, and
Yeah.
those sort of things. And I remember having conversation with my mom several times, like, well, I'm not sure what to do, and we had started having that talk, and it wasn't that far after that. Remember where she ended up passing a colon cancer, and I think it wasn't too far before that we ended up putting her in a home, but it wasn't very long. I mean,
Well, that was before we met.
yeah, but she hadn't
Um,
been in for, I mean, maybe a year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It wasn't very long, but it was only due to the dementia. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
oh,
Yeah.
I
okay.
know it's an emotional. It's emotional listening to their stories and yours, and now I've got to try try to get through this.
It's not a gauntlet. I promise.
I know, I know. So, my dad passed 5 years ago, about 5.5 years ago, and it was unexpected. It happened very fast, and he was in the hospital only 3 days, and he was
Yeah.
there with me for
Yeah.
this. Yeah. So he passed, and then that night we went back to the hospital because it was out of town from where we live, and so we were in a hotel. We had gotten from us and my brother and sister, and we were asleep, and we woke up, all of us, which is weird at the same time. So 4 people
Mm-hmm.
at the same time woke up, and there were these lights shooting across the ceiling and like down the
What?
wall,
Yeah, it was wild.
Wow.
and him and my brother both kind of sat up out of bed and we're like, what is that? But then, you're in like in that half asleep, half awake, and you just kind of go back to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time I remember just thinking, oh, it's like a car headlights or something coming through
Oh.
the window. You just think
Yeah.
that because the
Mhm.
hotels have the big windows. But weren't we on the like
On the
really
third
high?
floor.
We were really high up for one.
Mhm.
Everything was drawn. All
Yeah.
the shades were drawn because I can't sleep with any light.
Nope.
I think we've spoke about this
Yeah.
before. So I definitely knew it wasn't that. It was just really strange. And the next morning when we all woke up, we started talking about it. How
Yeah.
these lights all like shot across the ceiling, and he had passed at about 5:30 that evening.
Mm.
And so this was probably about like what 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, it was about one or
something.
two.
Mhm. And it seems to be on my dad's side of the family. His sister passed before that, grandparents, and it seems to be like every single one of them. There's some association with lights
Yeah. Yep.
Hmm.
that my family members see
Yep.
after they pass, which is really strange. Like
Yeah,
they
it-
use lights
It's very interesting.
to
Yeah.
communicate. I know my aunt, when she passed, her husband would go out of the front of the house and he would walk down to the street lamp and talk to her, and it would only come on and go off because I guess the light was broken. It would only come on when he would talk to her,
Wow.
Wow.
and then it would go back off when he would leave. So that's another light thing. And I know my
Yeah.
cousin had something else. I don't really recall it at this
Yeah.
time. But it doesn't stop there with my father. So my dad was really scared of death. He wouldn't prepare a will. He wouldn't talk about it. And he found out he had stage 4 lung cancer a few years before this happened. And we tried to, talk about it. And he had really bad temper. He was Irish, mixed with some other stuff, but definitely had that Irish temper. And so we just kind of dropped it with him. And it seems like that carried over because after we had the funeral, we drove back to the house and, he was remarried. And when we came in, there were several things knocked over in the house. So one thing was a plant, and then we went back to the bedroom to help my stepmom with something, and I had helped him with this gift. He had asked me one year to, get this jewelry armoire, one of those small ones that just holds your jewelry. That has like several, like 5, 6 drawers in it, and it was knocked over.
Oh, wow.
And there were like 3 drawers that were across the room, flipped upside down with all the jewelry on the floor when we walked in the bedroom. And I remember my stepsister, like we were trying to pick it up and she goes, I'm really freaked out right now. Like
Yeah.
she was like
Yeah.
really, and my stepmom at the time was like, oh, it was the dog just knocked it over. But there's no way,
No.
Yeah.
not this thing, maybe the plant, but it was just like, it looked like in rage, like
Yeah.
something had been knocked over.
Now,
It was really odd.
but the thing is, guys, and I'm not saying you're understating it, but that thing wasn't just knocked over. That jewelry armoire,
Yeah.
the drawers, granted, had been, I'm not
Flung
kidding, you,
in-
flung to the other side of the room. But this jewelry thing was on its top. It's not like it fell.
Yeah.
It had
It's
fallen
flipped.
onto its top.
Mhm.
I'm not sure how you do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
in that, I mean, that was the last thing that I really saw, but things kept happening after we left. Like my stepmom would tell us about things that she would do, like the Christmas tree got knocked over at 3 a.m. one night, stuff like that. So it's it's appropriate for how my father would have felt to for that to have happened.
Yeah.
Like he
Right.
would have come back pissed off, basically. So and so I mean it totally. Now as far as like contacting me, I had one dream about 2 weeks after he passed, and it's very similar to your guys' experience where he didn't say anything. And I saw him as I remember him as when I was a child. So he probably would have been in his late 30s, early 40s. And he just walked up to me, gave me a hug, and then turned around and walked away. And that was it. And I haven't had anything since.
Wow.
So it was just like goodbye.
Yeah.
Because he was on a ventilator when he passed and he couldn't speak to us. He actually never woke back up. So I think that's all he needed to say to me, at least. But it's just weird that the dream thing,
Yeah.
again, and they don't speak.
No.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
But it's like you know what
Maybe
they're
they
saying
can't.
though, or like you can
Yeah.
feel what they're saying. I don't know how to. That's why I was like, I don't know if it was telepathically. I know that she didn't actually say anything. It was just, but I knew that
Right.
she was trying to tell me she's tired,
Right.
kind of
Right.
thing. But,
Right.
yeah.
And I didn't like even hear words in my head. It was just like I knew he was saying goodbye. Like
Yeah.
goodbye. I
Well-
love you, you know?
If I can give a
Mm.
slight little bit of a perspective on that evening in the hotel.
Yeah, because you remember it more. I was so devastatingly tired
Yeah.
and from crying that I couldn't.
So
remember a
white
whole lot.
light. So if you could imagine what a a road flare when it burns red,
Oh yeah.
imagine that brilliance, but brilliant white.
Yeah, it was.
Whoa.
It
bright.
was. It's so hard to explain that to someone that it was just. I've never prior to that day nor after have ever seen that kind of light in my entire life. And what happened was we're in two different beds. There's her and I in one, and the her brother and sister in another. And I heard her brother get up, and I just kind of, it's the military man in me. If I hear motion, I wake up, and I looked over, and he at the top of his voice said, "Who is that?" Because he was looking at
Oh.
the sky, and when that happened, it just took off. That's what woke us all up.
Yeah.
The light
Oh, I
moving
got chills.
woke us all up because we heard it.
And I feel like I remember it coming across the ceiling and down the wall. But I
Yes,
don't.
It
Is that
did.
what you remember?
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
It was odd.
that is definitely one of the ones that when somebody says, I don't know if I believe in ghosts or anything like that, I don't ever fight anybody on it because that's a very personal thing. I don't really have an issue with it, but I offer that one a little bit, because I think she's okay with some time has passed, and if somebody asks me, that's one of the ones that I offer. I'm like, that was corroborated by 4 people
Yeah.
at a very specific time. It's not like that just it did manifest, but it's not like there wasn't a I mean, there is a fire or strobe light, in some of those rooms,
Oh, yeah.
that if there's a fire, but what a strobe light
Yeah.
looks like.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It was not that.
It just reminded me of like a burst of energy.
Yeah.
That's how I can explain it. Just like a huge burst of energy.
Yep.
Like what you would imagine that to look like.
Did it illuminate the room at all, or was
Everything.
Yes.
it? Yeah.
Everything.
Whoa.
It almost turned it from night to day. It
Wow,
was
it was
so
super
bright. Yeah.
That's crazy.
And it was startling, and it's hard to explain that you can hear light, but that
Yeah, I
light we
mean,
could hear.
When you said
Yeah.
that you heard it, I was like, you heard light? Like that's the
Yes. It was so weird when it moved. It made noise.
Yeah.
Like it had mass.
Like I mean, I don't know how to describe it. Almost like not necessarily a buzzing sound, but like how
No.
you would expect like energy to have
Yeah.
a sound.
Okay.
Like
It
electrical?
Like
that
if you
makes
were
sense.
to touch it,
Like if
shock you.
Like if you were like like
Whirring?
next to a
Yeah.
transformer or something where you hear that like buzzing,
Yes.
whirring sound.
Yeah. That bright
Exactly
too.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that bright
Yeah.
Yeah.
in a hotel room.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
That's
interesting.
hope you don't mind. I kind of
No,
okay.
it's not because I mean, from that day, my mind is kind of
Yeah, well, yeah.
Hazy.
from going through all of that, so I don't I remember specifics about. I do remember seeing it. I remember it being bright, but I don't remember exactly
Yeah.
all the details because I was half asleep as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, it was odd.
Yeah. I've never heard
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I guess like of orbs and stuff, but something that
Mm-hmm. No,
bright,
this
that's
was
crazy. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and then to this day, obviously the both of us we're all in the paranormal podcast. What we do for that's what both of us do. And I listen to other shows, yourselves, and other shows that talk about it. I have yet to hear that again.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It was so unique that it would only because of her dad, and I know how he was. It would only
Matches his
it
personality.
matches his personality.
Yeah.
He's like, oh no, you're gonna know I'm here.
Yeah.
I am really ticked off right now that
One
this
way or
happened.
another.
Oh
Yeah,
my
Mm-hmm.
goodness.
yeah. It was just
Mm-hmm.
wild.
That's awesome.
Well, and that's kind of tying it into the celebration. It's where when we talk about the ofrenda and we talk about kind of that thin veil with with this celebration. Um, if I've got it right, this is when family members can come and see their loved ones, where that veil gets lifted for that small amount of time. And I'm really trying not to sound like a Disney cartoon,
No, it's
but yeah,
No, but Coco was a really good movie.
it was a good
I
movie.
thought.
Yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
It wasn't bad.
I think at least, if anything, it brought awareness to the holiday and
For
why
sure.
it is celebrated.
yeah.
And I like that part about it. And it is an emotional movie.
Yeah,
Very.
and I will say that as a,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't mean this to sound like like I'm getting up on a soapbox or anything, but as a brown skinned person, we don't have a ton of Disney movie
Yeah.
representations out there. So just to have
Yeah.
our culture up there and be accepted like that, for me was really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Representation matters.
That's
I
right.
feel like I
Yes, it
didn't
does.
realize that until I was older, because even Blue Beetle, to have a Latino superhero, I was like, heck yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But things like
Was that good?
I liked it, honestly. Like, there's George Lopez was surprisingly pretty hilarious, and
Really?
like I felt like there's little ways of that they were talking, or different words that they used, or jokes and stuff, that I just honestly, I walked out of there like feeling pretty proud to
Awesome.
be Latino.
That's
so.
awesome.
I haven't watched it, and I desperately wanted it to be good because of that reason. We
Yeah.
don't really have that. Of course, you can say Zorro and stuff like that, but that's I don't know, so stereotypical of certain things, which is kind of hard sometimes. But
Yeah.
It's
that's
getting
awesome.
better.
It is getting better.
Got to keep working on it.
Anyway, I'll
Take your
digress off my soapbox.
I almost jumped on it, so I'm glad you did that. I was gonna like keep going.
Can't help it. It was
Yeah.
it's just cool. But well, so yeah, I mean that's kind of what this celebration is about.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of listeners and watchers, may not have submitted, but it's always still up there. You can still email us. You can reach out to Eric and to Michelle too. And it's not doesn't have to be the end of the conversation. It's just an opportunity for people to talk, and get their voices heard. But it is a kind of a touching subject, and it's a little close to the vest. So I'm sure some people probably had a problem with that.
Well,
That's fine.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard to talk about. But if anything, you need to find someone to talk to, I think,
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
to feel not alone that you're having these experiences. Because more people have them than you know.
Yep.
They
Yeah.
just don't want to talk about it.
And
Well,
again,
listen, guys. Oh, good.
oh, I was just gonna say, and again, if ever there was a day that you're gonna share this, it would be today, because again,
Yep.
this is what
Agreed.
this day is about. It's about celebrating those loved ones that have passed on, And again, this isn't. It's not just this specific, like Dia de los Muertos itself may be a Mexican or a Latino, celebration,
Tradition.
but yes, tradition, but death has been celebrated in multiple cultures. The Vikings,
Absolutely.
the Druids. There's so many cultures that have celebrated death, and they're in different ways, of course. But yeah, I mean, if ever was a day that you were gonna you're gonna talk to somebody about it, or talk to you know
Talk
tell your
about your loved
stories, it would
ones.
definitely be today. Yeah.
Sure. Well, it makes sense.
I love that.
I love that
Yep.
too. Great way to close that up. That's perfect. In closing, Michelle, did you want to add anything?
No, I mean, yeah, just kind of seconding what just said, and I would love for, I don't know, us as a society, whatever, to not be so afraid of death, and be able
Yeah.
to, I mean, instead of funerals, celebration of life kind of thing, like let's be happy for what we had.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
not
We
quite as
definitely
good
need
as
to
Eric.
get back, yeah, to those
It's
those
really good.
those ancient, celebrations that
Mm-hmm.
we all come from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I mean,
especially in America, we all come from somewhere else except for maybe yours,
Yeah.
Native American.
yeah.
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 And even then, there's theories on that, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole right
Right.
now. But you need to look into your genealogy, see
Yeah.
the lands that you come from, because they're all very similar. And I was actually talking to him
Yes.
about, because I look in, I've got all the North European ancestry, so Druids, all that stuff,
Mhm.
and then the Samhain. And when I was reading everything about it, it sounds so much like
Yeah.
Day of the Dead.
this.
Yes.
Mhm.
Day of the
Yes,
Dead.
everything. I mean, is very similar. Now they incorporated like the harvest and stuff
Mm-hmm.
as well in that celebration. That's the only thing I found just a little bit different, but everything else was exactly the same
I
Mhm.
mean,
from what I saw.
they even used to dress up as, once the Catholic
Mm-hmm.
Church started getting involved as well, they would dress up as, angels, saints, and devils on All
Mm-hmm.
Hallows Eve. You know,
Yep. There you
Mm-hmm.
go.
so
Mm-hmm. Well, and Halloween
yeah,
doesn't come from here.
Yeah.
No, it
yeah,
does
no,
not.
it doesn't.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's
No.
always been interesting for me because so on my father's side, I come from I'm a Yaqui, yeah, which is an Aztec descendant. I don't know if
Mm.
you're familiar with it, but in southern Arizona, that's kind of either Navajo, Yaqui. It's kind of that whole area. But we come from the Sierra Madres, which is pretty far down into Mexico, the Baca de Iguachi area. So a lot of the same traditions and same things that have come from that area, sorry, that have made it up to America now. We still share a lot in common. So it's always been one of those things where we still do the quinceañeras. We still do I was raised in quinceañeras. It's caballero. God, I don't know, probably a million times in my life. So, um, but yeah, I'm so happy we had a chance to talk about this because it's always been one of those things that have been kind of in the back of my mind that I really wish I'd have wrapped my head around more. And I'm just glad that I found it at least at this stage of life. So,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's never too
so
late.
here's all the. Okay.
Yep.
No,
Oh,
I
yeah.
said it's never too late.
Right? Never too late. Well, guys, let's talk about We Believe to You. Where can people find you?
Do you have your script pulled up, Eric?
No, I don't. But you can find us on our website, webelievedu.com, Facebook, Instagram. We do have a Twitter, X, whatever it's
We
called now, but we
barely.
don't use it. So
Yeah,
don't
don't go
don't
there.
look
Neither
for
do
us
we,
there.
really.
Yeah. Facebook, Instagram, and like I said, we do have our website. If you want to check us out, we do have a shop where you can get some merch. And we do have an episode about Dia de los Muertos that we put out exactly 1 year ago. So if you want to check that out for a little bit of a deeper dive as to the tradition and where it comes from and all that, we gave like a brief summary here, but we go a little bit deeper there. So if you want to check
Great
that
show,
out,
by the way.
Yeah.
It's really
yeah,
good.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I should have pulled up the
Oh,
number,
go ahead,
but
sorry.
I should have pulled up the
It's
episode number.
100, I thought.
100.
Oh yeah, it
yeah.
is. It's
It's
100. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
episode 100.
Look at that. Repping.
Thank you.
But, yeah, no problem. So I know your podcast is available on Apple, but what other platforms are you guys on?
Spotify, anywhere
Spotify.
you can find it, and it's also on our website.
Audible.
Awesome.
Yeah. Mhm.
Cool.
Oh no.
Well, and same for us. We're kind of on Apple, every single other platform you could stick a podcast these days, and of course on YouTube. If you guys are still on, please like, subscribe, that whole fun thing that people say. I always hate saying that in all our videos, so
Yeah.
I never say it. Although I know I'm supposed to somehow, but no, guys, thanks again for hanging out and exploring this with us. Thank you for kind of being a sounding board of some stuff that I clearly just didn't know neither one of us really did.
I definitely learned some stuff from
Yeah.
you tonight. So
Oh,
Absolutely.
thank you.
And again, thank you for sharing such close to the vest and personal stories. We really do appreciate that.
Of course. And thank you for giving us that platform to do so.
Yeah.
This was
And
fun.
maybe we can
I
coerce you
enjoyed it.
guys to go ahead.
No, I said this was fun. I really enjoyed doing this. I just kind of blocked out the whole it's live and just pretended
Yeah.
like we were just it was
Exactly.
all of
It's
us.
no different than recording a
Yeah.
regular
Yeah.
episode, really. It's just people can talk to us if they want to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which, if you guys feel up to it, sometime we can run it back. You know, it
Definitely.
doesn't always have to be just this one.
For sure. That'd be
For
good.
sure.
yeah.
All right. Well, in closing, guys, thank you so much, and we'll go ahead and end it. And for anybody online, again, this will.
Thank you for watching.
Yeah, thank you for watching
Yes,
it.
thank
Oh,
you.
and by the way, this will also be in podcast form, so it will be released as a regular show. So anybody who's listening to it now, know that this was once a live show, and if we do it again, we'd love to have you guys. So with that, I'll give you guys some evening.
Bye.
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 Bye.